we're going to take a look at the special education process. On the right side of the page, you'll see a visual that depicts the special education process. We're going to go through each of the colored bubbles to talk about what each step means and more information about that step. But we'll start with timelines. The special education process is something that we wouldn't say it's very flexible. It protects students and it makes sure that we serve students who have disabilities appropriately, but we are bound to very specific timelines. For example, the student support team meetings are convened within 10 administrative days of the referral, meaning once a referral is made to start this process, a team has to convene within 10 administrative days, no matter what. If a team decides we are going to do an evaluation for special education, that evaluation must be completed and eligibility meetings must be held within 60 administrative days. If a child is found eligible for special education after that evaluation, the next step would be to hold an IEP meeting or an individualized education plan meeting within 30 calendar days of when a child is found eligible. Once that eligibility is solidified and an IEP is in place, IEP meetings must be held at least once per year at minimum. A reevaluation meeting must be considered every 3 years to determine if a child still remains eligible for special education. So let's take a look at step 1, the referral to special education. Once a referral is received, Arlington will schedule a student support team meeting or an SST meeting to discuss the referral within 10 administrative days. Parents must be invited to the meeting, but attendance is not required. A decision will be made as a team, including the family, whether to refer a child for an evaluation for special education. Parent consent is required in order to evaluate a child for special education. Anyone who suspects that a child may have a disability may refer the child, including the parents. If a team decides to refer a child for an evaluation for special education, evaluations are completed. So what type of evaluations are typically completed? If it's a child with speech-only concerns, then we would be typically completing what we call a speech-only evaluation. This consists of a speech and language evaluation, a teacher narrative, an observation, and of course a vision and a hearing screening. If the concerns present exceed speech-only concerns, then we would be considering a full study. This consists of a social history, a psychological evaluation that looks at how a child thinks and how they learn. It might look at memory or attention. An educational evaluation that would be a normed reference evaluation that looks at the child's current skills in reading, writing, and math. Information from the child's teacher or teachers via a teacher narrative, and of course a hearing and a vision screening. Depending the needs, there are other evaluations that the committee may decide are appropriate to consider, such as a speech and language evaluation, an occupational therapy evaluation, a physical therapy evaluation, or a medical evaluation. Something that is not required, though we do recommend, is for families to consider providing a parent narrative. Providing a parent narrative is a great way to add your perspective and any pertinent information to the committee discussion and for the committee to consider. Parents can provide important information that help the team know how the child is functioning at home. It can document their strengths and what your concerns are. It can highlight strategies that may have worked or that might not have worked in the home setting that might be relevant to school. So what are evaluation expectations? Evaluations are completed in all suspected areas of disability. They must be completed in the identified timeline, and the evaluation packet, or the reports of the evaluations, is available to parents at least 2 days prior to the meeting. All information, including information submitted by families such as parent narratives and any reports that you may supply from private clinicians or other optional information, is considered. So what happens when there are disagreements regarding an evaluation? If a family disagrees with an evaluation given during a child's evaluation process, the family has the right to have what is called an IEE, or an independent educational evaluation, conducted by a qualified person who does not work for the school. A family may request one IEE for each evaluation given during the current evaluation process. Upon request for an IEE, the school division will provide a family with information about specific available sources for obtaining an IEE from a qualified examiner. In other words, APS maintains a list of qualified sources that families may use to conduct an IEE. It's critical that you touch base with the school to get this list prior to pursuing any evaluations that you are anticipating as an IEE. The IEE is conducted at the expense of the school division. So, if you look in the upper right-hand corner, we've gone through the referral, the evaluation, and now we're at the eligibility component of the special education process. So, evaluations were completed, and we have now arrived at the eligibility meeting. It is important to note that parents are equal members of the committee. The committee consists of the parent and or guardian, and any folks that the parents may feel that they need to bring with them or would like to bring with them, the student support coordinator, the school psychologist, a social worker, a general education teacher who knows the child, a special education teacher, and an administrator, or the LEA, that stands for Local Education Agency. This committee may also include others such as a counselor, related service providers, nurse, and of course, as I mentioned, any others invited by the parents. So when we look at eligibility for special education in Virginia, the committee reviews existing data to determine if a child meets the criteria for identification with one or more disability classifications. On the right-hand side of the page, you'll see the classifications as outlined in the state of Virginia: autism, deaf blindness, developmental delay, which is through age 6, an emotional disability, a hearing impairment, intellectual disability, multiple disabilities, orthopedic impairment, other health impairment, specific learning disability, speech or language impairment, traumatic brain injury, and visual impairment, including blindness. When we look at the eligibility determination for special education, the committee must consider the following questions. The first question that needs to be considered is, does the child meet the criteria for one or more of the educational disabilities included in the Virginia regulations? That is the list of disabilities that I just went through, and there's specific criteria for each one of them. Question 2, is there documentation of an adverse effect on educational performance due to one or more of the documented characteristics of the disability? And question 3, due to the disability, does the student need specially designed instruction to access and progress in the general curriculum or in the grade level curriculum? If the response to all 3 questions are a yes, each one has to be a yes, parent consent is required in order to find a child eligible for special education. On that same note, once a child is eligible for special education, parent consent is also required to terminate eligibility in Virginia. On the right-hand side of the page, you'll see a very small version of an other health impairment worksheet. This is an example of the specific worksheet that we go through using the Virginia Department of Education's criteria for one of the disability classifications, an other health impairment. Eligibility worksheets for each of the disability classifications are posted on the Parent Resource Center's website. You're welcome to view this information in advance so that you are knowledgeable going into the meeting of what will be discussed. Looking over to the graphic of the special education process, we have gone through the referral, the evaluation, and the eligibility. Let's say we propose eligibility for special education for our child. Then, within 30 calendar days of that eligibility decision, an individualized education plan must be proposed. This is known as an IEP. IEPs are developed by a team that includes parents. This document addresses strengths and weaknesses through measurable annual goals, modifications, and accommodations. This document outlines service delivery and is reviewed at least annually. As I mentioned, it must be developed within 30 calendar days of the eligibility. Arlington's best practice encourage forwarding a draft of the present levels and goal proposals to families at least 2 days prior to the IEP meeting. You'll see on the screen something that we're calling the golden thread. This is the thread of information in which we would like to see woven throughout the document of the IEP. It will take information from a child's evaluation and weave that into the present levels. The present levels then inform the goals and accommodations and modifications in which the child receives as they're receiving services for special education. So we've been through the referral, the evaluation, the eligibility meeting. The child was found eligible and now has an individualized education plan. At least every 3 years, the school must reevaluate the child to determine whether the child is still a child with a disability who is in need of special education services. At the 3-year reevaluation, a planning meeting determines whether additional assessments are needed in order to determine eligibility. Again, parents are participants in this meeting. And that brings us back to our homepage. That is a very brief synopsis of the complicated process of special education. Please make an appointment with the Parent Resource Center to go through this in more depth and talk about any concerns you might have about your child or the special education process at their school. Thanks.